What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. So it's 2021 and you're looking to buy an E46 and you're wondering to yourself, how reliable is it actually going to be? Is it going to break down on me? Is the car going to be a complete lemon? Is it going to leave me stranded in random places? So today, I'm going to try my best to answer all those questions for you. I'm going to go over the full maintenance history on my car since I purchased it and just kind of go over the fact if BMWs are unreliable or not. So without further ado, let's head on straight into the video. So first things first, before you even head out and go purchase your car, you really want to make sure that the car you're buying has had a complete service history at a reputable shop. You also want to make sure that the body of the car is super straight, looks extremely clean. You want to check for rust everywhere under the car, the rear quarter panels, the trunk, the front near the doors, also at the hood. You also want to take the car for a drive to see if it drives smooth. These M54 engines from the factory come out really smooth driving engines, so you really want to make sure the engine runs smooth. You want to check for any clunks when you're driving, any suspension noises, any stuff like that. Anything out of the ordinary, you want to make sure you don't get. And when you're popping the hood to look at the engine, these M54 engines are notorious for cooling problems. So you want to make sure you're looking for your coolant leaks. You also want to make sure you're looking for your oil leaks, so all the gaskets, so the valve cover gasket, the oil pan gasket, and the oil filter housing gasket. You also want to look around the engine bay, look at all your vacuum hoses. Make sure they're in good condition, because these cars over time, all their vacuum hoses just tend to become brittle and tend to crack. There's honestly a lot of little things to look out for. Regardless of whatever car you buy, there are going to be a couple issues with it, whether they're big or small issues. And this generally honestly depends on how much you're willing to spend on the car. If you spend more money on the car, of course you're going to get a car that's in better condition. So to help you guys out, I went out and I made an in-depth checklist for all the major weak points you should look out for before you purchase your first E46. And I'm going to leave the checklist down below for you guys to copy and paste and print or do whatever you guys want with it. But just have a look at it, take it with you when you go look at your car. It'll help you out a lot. Trust me, I wish I had this when I bought my first E46. So back to my personal experience with the car I have in specific right now. So when I went and looked at my car and checked it out, everything checked out for me. Everything looked good in my eyes. So before I went ahead and purchased it, I also took it to a Euro shop that specializes in BMWs. They also had a look at it and gave me the go ahead that the car is good. There were only two issues in the car when I went ahead and purchased it that I was aware of before I bought it. The first thing was there was a lot of oil sweating around the oil pan. So that means the oil pan gasket was probably soon to go. And the second thing was when I took the car for a drive, I also noticed that the brakes felt really weak. And when I went ahead to look at them, the pads were fairly low and the rotors just looked completely rusted. So knowing these issues with the car, I went back to the owner and I bargained with him. The original sale price of the car is $4,000 and I brought him down to $3,500. And this isn't Canadian, by the way. And also at the time of purchase, the car had 195,000 kilometers on it. So now that the car was in my possession, I took the car home and I went ahead and I did a complete intensive service. So the things that changed, I did a complete oil change, I did a coolant flush, I did a transmission flush, I also went ahead and did the valve cover gasket and the oil pan gasket. And on top of that, I also went ahead and did the spark plugs and the coils. And depending on where you live, as I live in Canada and the roads get quite salty in the winter, I also did a full underbody rust protection. So then once I had that intensive service done and I knew everything was going to run reliably, about a week later, I went ahead and I took my car to a Euro shop and did the oil pan gasket. And the only reason I didn't do this one at home was that the engine has to be supported from an engine jack and you have to drop the front subframe. So I just didn't have the tools at home. So I went ahead and I just took it to a shop and did it. And then after the oil pan gasket was done, I brought the car back home and then I went ahead and I addressed the brakes. So for the front brakes, I went ahead and I did a 330 Ci front conversion with ECS brake lines all around the car. And then for the rears, I went ahead and I just upgraded the pads and rotors. And I know what you guys are thinking. When I bought the car, all I needed was the oil pan gasket and the brakes to be done. Why'd I go ahead and do all those gaskets, change all the fluids? I did all those things because I purchased the car at 195,000 kilometers. This car is a fairly old car and it is getting into the higher mileage. And I really just wanted that peace of mind knowing that my car's gonna run reliably, not leak any oil, not leak any coolant, and just be a nice, dependable BMW. So with all that being said, after about 4 months of ownership, I put around 7,000 kilometers on the car. The first issue happened. I noticed the car was starting to run a bit weird. It was starting to run rough. The cold starts were really rough. I kind of hesitated a little bit. And then in terms of power, the car also felt quite a bit slower. And then finally, the check engine light came on. So I went ahead and I scanned it and the code came up as bank 1 and 2 running lean. So after going through a bunch of forums and checking online, what I came to the conclusion as, my car definitely has a vacuum leak somewhere behind the MAF sensor. So I went ahead, took the car to be smoke tested, and there you behold, there was a crack in the intake boot. And all my E46 techs know this, but these E46s, especially over time, all their vacuum hoses tend to crack, the intake boot cracks, the diesel valve, the O-ring gasket tends to fail. Vacuum leaks are extremely notorious on these E46s. So I went ahead and headed to the dealership and bought the OEM upper intake boot, as well as the lower intake boot. And as I was down there replacing the part, I also went ahead and cleaned out my idle control valve, as well as the intake manifold. And after that, the car ran amazing. I cleared the check engine light and it never came back on. So after that issue was resolved, roughly 5 months later, I put 7,000 kilometers on the car and then the second issue occurred. It was a hot summer day and I was stuck in traffic. I had the AC blasting and then I started to notice my car was overheating. So I quickly pulled over to the side, opened the hood, and then I took a good look at everything. I mean everything. And for the life of me, I couldn't find any coolant leaks. Everything seemed completely normal to me. It was just the temperatures are rising really high. So I went ahead and let the car cool down. I kind of waited for the traffic to die down a bit so I could just drive quickly to the shop. And then after I took it to the dealership, I had them diagnose the cooling issue. And what they came up with is that the front AC cooling fan failed. So this is also known as the front auxiliary electric fan, but this fan basically serves a dual purpose. It cools the engine when it gets too hot. It's not always on. It's only when the temperature of the engine rises a bit too high, so that turns on to cool down. As well, it only ever turns on if you turn on the AC. And I know this electric fan also varies depending on if you have an automatic or a manual, but in general, that's the purpose of the fan. So I went ahead and I picked up an auxiliary fan, and on top of that, I also picked up a thermostat because they're fairly cheap. And if I was down there and I already removed the front manual fan, I went ahead and also did the thermostat because it was right there and it was nice and easy to do. And I also know those are also notorious for failing on E46s, so I just went ahead and did it to have the peace of mind. After that was done, the car ran amazing, cooled down good, and the AC ran good. I had no issues, even on the hot summer days in traffic. So roughly about another 4 months later, I put another 5,000 kilometers on the car. And then I started to notice the cold starts on the car were starting to feel weak again. It would kind of stutter a little bit when I would cold start it in the morning. And every here and there, I'd also notice a white puff of smoke coming out of my exhaust. And it was never consistent. It was completely randomly and it only happened once. So again, went ahead, did my research online, looked through some forums, and then I came down to the conclusion that my PCV system was failing. And from a lot of people who are saying online, these PCV systems actually tend to fail roughly every 80,000 kilometers. So it's just good maintenance practice to end up replacing them anyways. So I went ahead, I picked up a full PCV system replacement. I installed it on the car. And even when I was installing it, I also noticed that the lines I was taking off my car were also extremely clogged. So it did look like it had to be replaced. So I went ahead and did that. And after I got that in, I turned on the car, drove it around, and the car ran amazing again. The cold starts were fixed, and I never saw any smoke puff out the back anymore. And I also know depending on where you live and what country you bought your car in, there's two types of PCV systems. There's a cold climate PCV system and a warm climate PCV system. They both basically do the exact same thing. It's just that the cold climate version has a warm blanket on top of it. And from what I can tell, that's the only difference. And then after that issue was fixed, so far to this date, I haven't had a single other issue with this car. So long story short, after a year and a half of ownership, I've only ever had 3 unexpected issues with this car, and all 3 of them were easily fixed in my driveway. The costs weren't too high. And I'd say if you have a good hands-on experience with cars and you're good with working on cars by yourself, these are actually amazing cars to get as they're really easy to work on. And majority of the time, the issues are really easily fixed by yourself. The parts for these cars are also super attainable. You can have to go aftermarket, you could go OEM. There's tons in stock anywhere you go. They're fairly cheap. You can also get used parts if you're really on a budget. But other than that, I'd say overall, this car has actually been a really reliable car for me. You just really have to know what to look out for. So overall, as a whole recap, I would say if you go ahead and you make sure you buy the right E46 that has the proper maintenance history and you know it's a solid car, you really can't go wrong. I know there's a big stigma around BMWs being unreliable, but if you buy the right one and you know what to expect when you purchase one, these actually end up being really good cars, and they actually end up being really fun cars, and you own a BMW for around 1/3 of the price if you're willing to work on it yourself. But I honestly can't stress enough on how important it is to buy the right car. Please don't rush it. I know you get excited, you see like your first car, you're like, oh, I really want to buy it, I really want to buy it. But honestly, stay patient, you'll find the right one. And don't buy a lemon. Learn from me. The first car I bought was a complete lemon. I rushed into it and I ended up having a lot of issues and I ended up selling it. This is the second E46 I've owned. Perfect car. So much more reliable. Runs amazing. I'm at 230,000 kilometers now and the car is just perfect. There's no issues with it whatsoever. Just keep up with your maintenance. Do your oil changes often. I do my oil changes every 6,000 kilometers with full synthetic Model 540. And then other than that, it's a good car. She'll last you. These M54s are proven engines. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys found it helpful, and I hope I answered some of you guys' question whether you find these cars unreliable or reliable. It just really depends on what car you pick. Make sure you pick the right one and you'll be a happy owner. If you guys have any questions, just leave them down below. I'll be more than happy to answer. But other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Forever grinding, waiting for my time to shine just like a diamond. When life is rough and I ain't with that funny stuff, I use it all as motivation, but it's